challenges they are facing themselves. Their inability to bring out reasonable yield or return on that borrowing and be able to pay. No economy can progress reasonably well with lending rates hitting above 25–30%. It's horrible because you're competing with people who borrow at less than 5% in other countries, and the whole world is today a global village. While we borrow at 30%, we don't have energy, we haven't looked at that factor. So you find that people who do businesses, either in agricultural sector, manufacturing, production and other sectors, they don't compete favorably because the cost of doing business here is very high. So these banks are picking, they are cherry picking the kind of people they fund in these sectors. But over the years, we've seen because the oil and gas sector has proven to be our most reliable sector. You see, today, the banking sector is almost 30% exposed. Out of the 18 trillion you see, more than 30% of all of that are in oil and gas related transactions. And that's a shame, despite the fact that we have over the years falling prey to that risk, high concentration risk, like we saw in 2008, 2009, where oil and gas transactions and margin lending killed, almost killed banks, except that AMCON came to their rescue. So now, in view of the issue we're seeing now, central bank mentioned a number of issues, credit issues, asset quality. So I think we should better be talking about those issues now. Okay. But when you talk about banking performance, you look at CAMEL framework, for looking at, and that's what we see the central banks all over the world, uses or use to appraise bank performance. Capital adequacy ratio is a critical issue. Asset quality is very critical. Management depth, experience, and capability is very important. Earnings strength too. When you look at returns on asset, return on equity, and all of for management, you look at cost to income ratio, how efficiently are banks managing themselves, and then the almighty issue of liquidity, which could lead to systemic issues and further damage of confidence in the system. So these are worries of central bank. And the central bank in Nigeria, just like around the world, they have the duty to to organize what to call stress testing on banks every year. And I think they have done some recent stress tests. That's from where they are making this statement. Because each time they do a stress test, they check how this bank will respond to certain variables, certain changes, certain fluctuations in market conditions or macroeconomic conditions. It could be change in interest rates. It could be change in maybe employment rate. It could be change in FX rate and all of that. How these changes affect banks' balance sheets. And unfortunately, from the recent they did, among the big banks, there doesn't seem to be major issues. But the medium to small banks are having big issues in interest rate volatility, foreign exchange rate volatility, even employability, issues, staff attrition, and all of that.
So is it out of place now for one to wonder if possibly there might be another crisis coming the way of the banks, something like what was witnessed in 2009, 2010?
If we are careful as a nation, I don't see a crisis coming up. What I see is a situation whereby the regulator, who has consistently used risk-based approach to regulation of the financial industry, and the players in this industry to work closer together to implement policies. For example, we have a competency framework that has been lying in the cooler for a long time. We haven't implemented to ensure that people who run these banks are competent, skilled, knowledgeable, and they have the heart, the good heart, to run this system for the generality of the nation. Not people who are looking for what they can grab, for themselves, to the detriment of the whole depositors. Because once a bank goes down, it affects heavily financial inclusion and the banking culture in the economy. So we can't afford to have this failure. Central bank, they know how these things run. They know these investors. To bring them to use moral suasion, use all forms of, how do I put it, governance practices to ensure that these banks are well run. It's not a rocket science. If you have a well-capitalized bank can fall overnight if it's badly managed. A small or not so well-capitalized bank can also grow over time if it's well managed. It's as simple as that. Management is critical to the growth of the financial system. And because it has to do with money, fiduciary issues are very sensitive. A human being and money is just always a problem. Like keeping a rat, with fish. There's a problem. So you have to have a decent man, a decent, and well-trained, professionals to run these banks. We have done well over the years with the governance structure in central bank. People that get to AGM and above in banking system today approve at central bank. And in some way, you see quality people up there. We now need to get these people to sit down and fashion out, well-articulated credit policy guides on how they lend. I've worked in a bank. Some of the people, the two banks I've worked in my career are banks where even loans given to the director, the MD or chairman, they go through the whole process. And the MD stays quiet when they say, will this loan be approved or not? It's not his decision. The whole committee, what you call Management Credit Committee, and then the board will say, we will do or will not do. And once we say we will not do, the MD ceases at that point. That's governance. Even if we say, oh, we do because we know it's our MD's, but we also do it based on sound fundamentals of credit. Any bank that cannot run that way cannot survive. So we are saying, let all the banks have a great model of credit risk, management system. Have a great model of governance. Who is your board? Who is in your board? Is it just based on emotion, or are these people competent and well trained?
So at this time, the Bankers Committee needs to work very closely with the central bank.
That's the point I'm making. So it's not about threatening. There won't be a crisis, I believe, if the central bank can call the stakeholders and consistently engage them. Forget the occasional Bankers Committee meeting, which is good, but consistently engage these people, bring them to the table, dine with them, wine with them, let them know why we must build this economy together. Because and this sector is just one part of the financial sector. That's just the money market. We see how the capital market and all of that. And unfortunately, again, the banking stocks in our economy constitute more than, I think, 30–40% of the total stock in the stock market. So if the banks are not healthy, so many parts of the financial system and the whole macroeconomic system will not be healthy. So we need our banks to work well. And if you see what these banks are doing in the rest of Africa, you'll be proud of Nigerian banks. I don't want to start calling names here. Banks who have gone to East Africa, West Africa, even now to Southern Africa, and then even across the globe, Europe and so on. And some of these banks are still branching out. I know some banks in Nigeria who are planning to go to Hong Kong and America over time. We need to build, brands like Nigerian brands. I'm trying to resist myself from calling names, because I know some quality names that are pushing beyond the boundaries of this. And when they go there, they insist on the same level of governance, and they give example. The way they train their staff, the way they run things, they give example to the rest of the banks in the industry. So I'm proud of Nigerian banks, but we need to settle down a bit and get a few things better. Let me not forget to say that human capital, training and development is critical for running the banking system. Every bank MD should make sure they sit down and look at their training, system, capacity building system, and make sure it's properly aligned so that people who do this lending, people who manage operational risk and market risk, get it right. It is well with Nigerian banks. That's where I'm going to sign off.
All right. Oji Udemezue, that's a very good way for us to anchor this conversation. Financial and management consultant. Thank you for coming on the program today. Well, Business Morning continues after now. Stay with us.